Trying to amend. And he asked me another question here. I just talked to the priest this morning. I went up to Father. I said, after I went to confession last week, I says, I remember several other things I did. I said, I want to give me time to contemplate this week. And I asked him if I'd come out and make confession again. Because the first time I made confession, it was quick and I wasn't thinking as fast as I can now. I want to make a list of all the different stupid stuff I did, whether it's major and minor, which is, I hope you believe it is all minor. But I want to make amends because I'm right there on the edge and I want to go over the line. You know what I mean? I think that's what Keith wanted to know. That was the question Keith asked. Lisa?
Oh my.
Come on, Lisa. I think Lisa wants to know some of the people that influenced me in my life. Some of the people that influenced me is, I think, my mother, I think, would be number one. My father would be number two. I think some of you met Father Phil down in Daytona Beach. Father Phil was special to me. It still is. I hear from Father Phil. I hear from him. Since this happened, I might hear from him every week to 10 days. He says, I asked him to pray for me. He says, that's the one thing I know how to do. He says, count on me. And I think Father Phil is a big, big influence on me. I think Gerald Flaherty, I don't know, you probably wouldn't know him, but he was my neighbor in Springett Oaks. He took me under his wing. Here he was, a big shot, and I was a janitor. Here Jerry Flaherty became vice president of Caterpillar. And he was just so wonderful to us and our family. I think those are the four people. I think those are the four people that influenced me. I'm sure there's many, 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 many more. But right now, off the top of my head, those would be the people that influenced me. Lisa, do you have another question?
Yeah, we were talking last night about what comforts you. What's the best thing for comfort?
Huh.
And you made one comment.
Okay.
Number one.
The question was, what comforts me? I think you all know what comforts me the most. What comforts me the most is going down that back road, going around that corner and seeing what's around the bend. Another thing that comforts me right now, more than anything, right now, is holding Pat in bed at nighttime. Any other questions?
How did you meet Aunt Pat?
How did I meet Aunt Pat? I think we all heard that story, and I'm proud of it, and I think Pat is too. Pat, come here. Come here. Come here, Pat. How did I meet Aunt Pat? I met Aunt Pat the first day of high school. She was going up the steps. The bell rang to go to class. She was running up the steps and her books went all over hell's creation. It was a mess. Everybody was running to class and I stopped and picked them up. I stopped and picked them up. It was the best thing I ever did in my life. I would have did it for anybody. It was just, I think, my nature. Pat thanked me. And I said to her, that's okay. I'll dance at your wedding. It happened. Happily ever after.
46 years.
46 years.
46.
Yeah, and I'm 66 years old now. And I often wondered which one of us children, mother's children, would be the next one to go on. Who would ever thought would be the baby? And you know what? I'm proud to be the one. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? And any other questions?
I really don't have any questions because you basically said it all.
Tell us a little bit about buying the homes and...
Buying the homes and that. Well, you know, my life was, I think that you all know my life a little bit, mine and Pat's. And it wasn't just me, it was us.
Yeah.
Your mother got you started.
Yeah, let's start there. One time I was at home, right after we got married. I might have been 20. I'm guessing 20 years old. A year after we got married. Year or two. I mentioned it to my mom. I said, I'd like to buy an apartment house. Why? I said, I don't know. I don't know. You know, I had a hard time through school. For some reason, God gave me that. When I mentioned that to Mother, I think I remember, it wasn't maybe the next day or so, she looked in the newspaper. She seen this man's named Paul Warfield. Jim Warfield was. She called this Jim Warfield. He was just going into business. She said, Jim, maybe this wasn't her perfect words. She said, do you have any apartment houses for sale? This is Mom telling me the story. Jim said, yeah. He says, this doctor in here wants to buy a boat. And he has this 2-unit, single floor apartment house. Well, this 2-unit, single floor apartment house turned out to be our first property. This 2-unit apartment house, we didn't have no money. We bought a bunch of white paint. We scavenged her from Pat's daddy's. He used to do aluminum siding. We got these old shutters. This is what's neat. We cut these shutters in half to make them fit the windows. We put them together with little metal things. Hell, I couldn't do nothing. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew is how to paint and clean up the yards. Put the shutters up the best I could. Daggone, I rented this daggone thing out and usually it worked. I think this is a story of where I started, we started. More Pat as much as me.
Yeah.
We started buying these daggone things and we said, oh man, it's working. I met a guy in at York Federal. Trying to think of his name. Do you know, remember Pat?
Mike McCleary.
Mike McCleary. He was a big shot in the bank there. I was sitting there. I had $25 savings bond. I asked Carl how to save money. Carl told me to save a savings bond each week. Well, I had one big old pile of savings bonds. I was there in the office, writing my name on them. This Mike McCleary came by. He says, what are you doing? I says, I'm paying off my house. Well, here you see me out as a young guy with this pile of savings bonds. Well, it's Mike McCleary. Mike McCleary? He became a big shot in the bank. Well, Mike McCleary was a ticket to me. Jim Warfield was a ticket to me. One thing led to another. I had buying. I was selling. I was renting. I didn't know. I took it as slow as I could because I might have did 1 or 2 a year. I took it slow so I wouldn't take away from the children. Me and Pat would work a month at a time to try and get a house done and sold. It was flying. I had people waiting for the houses I had done. To this day, I get cards from people thanking me. I was doing a service for people, but helping myself. One day I sat down and looked at, what do I have? What do I have? I didn't even realize what I had. I ended up pretty good shape. I thank Pat for being my partner. Not just in life, but in that business. And it was a business. It's still a business. I still have a lot of paperwork to do. It's going to be turned over to Pat. Pat understands where we're at. God was good to me. I never wanted for nothing. I tried to do different things for different people. I'm not bragging. It was quiet. God treated me good, and I tried to treat other people good. I think that's about the end of my story. And again, I love you all. And all the nieces and nephews. I didn't get to know a lot of them. I got to know some of them. And every one of them I love, and I love you all. This is Uncle Jim and Aunt Pat.